Друзья, салют. С вами Гранд Инквизитор. И сегодня я вас приглашаю в спокойное, медитативное путешествие без всякого экшона, с небольшим вкраплением сюжета. Это проект, который я проходил очень-очень давным-давно. Странно прозвучало. В то время приходилось ставить всякие русификаторы, танцевать с бубном, чтобы его запустить, чтобы поиграть. Это была, в принципе, наверное, первая такая игра, с которой обычно, знаете, я что-то делать дополнительно, ну его нафиг, проще отказаться. А тут настолько заинтересовало, что очень хотелось, и потратил тогда несколько часов, помню. Это было... Я даже не скажу, сколько лет назад. Очень-очень-очень давно. Сейчас, когда есть возможность купить это в Стиме, что тянуть? Давайте начинать. Бейте Чайковский, кофе, вкусняшки, возможно, плед. У нас последние пару дней холодно, ветрено. Присаживайтесь поудобнее. Прожмите лайк, подписку, чтобы не забыть. И я желаю всем приятного просмотра.
Dear Esther, the morning after I was washed ashore, salt in my ears, sand in my mouth, and the waves always at my ankles, I felt as though everything had conspired to this one last shipwreck. I remembered nothing but water, stones in my belly and my shoes, threatening to drag me under to where only the most listless of creatures swim.
Кто мы? Как мы здесь оказались? В результате кораблекрушения, я полагаю. Кто такая эта самая Эстер? И что это за вышка? Мигающая и манящая красным светом. Может быть, на этом маяке найдется что-то или кто-то. Хотя он, скорее всего, заброшен. Фонарик включается автоматически. Спасибо разработчикам. Кстати, я не знаю, что в этой версии Landmark Edition изменили, вероятно. Добавилась как-то графика, обновился немножко процесс. Я помню саму игру, но я не помню подробностей и в целом... Да, это место определенно давным-давно заброшено. Как-то привязались ко мне эти давным-давно. Какие-то химические формулы. И абсолютное отсутствие лестницы наверх. Да, она должна была бы начинаться где-то тут, но... Время ничего не щадит. На сам маяк мы не попадем. Кстати, сейчас вспомнился крайне отличный фильм с Робертом Паттинсоном. Не воспринимайте это уже прям так, чтобы как-то маяк. Очень серьезная работа и очень хорошая, качественная. С точки зрения визуала, с точки зрения сюжета. Рекомендую всем, кто не смотрел. Котельная. Какие-то банки. Видимо, с краской или еще чем. Давайте сходим, посмотрим, что наверху. Также мы могли бы пройти по этим скалам вдоль берега. Дорожкой явно давно не пользовались. Все заросло. Оу. Опасно.
Donnelly reported the legend of the hermit, a holy man who sought solitude in its most pure form. Allegedly, he rode here from the mainland in a boat without a bottom, so all the creatures of the sea could rise at night to converse with him. How disappointed he must have been with their chatter. Perhaps now, when all that haunts the ocean is the rubbish dumped from the tankers, he'd find more peace. They say he threw his arms wide in a valley on the south side, and the cliff opened up to provide him shelter. They say he died of fever 116 years later. The shepherds left gifts for him at the mouth of the cave, but Donnelly records they never claimed to have seen him. I have visited the cave and I have left my gifts, but like them, I appear to be an unworthy subject of his solitude.
Интересно. Видимо, об этой пещере как раз речь шла. Какой-то проход. Ау. Но дальше нам не пройти. Вернемся на тропу. Крайне опасные места. И вряд ли у нас получится преодолеть этот провал. В таком случае вернемся и пройдем по берегу. Ветер тут не слабый. Только мусор какой-то валяется на берегу. Да, частички водорослей. Здесь мы можем подняться, вернуться на тропу.
When you were born, your mother told me, a hush fell over the delivery room. A great red birthmark covered the left side of your face. No one knew what to say, so you cried to fill the vacuum. I always admired you for that you cried to fill whatever vacuum you found. I began to manufacture vacuums just to enable you to deploy your talent. The birthmark faded by the time you were 6 and had gone completely by the time we met, but your fascination with the empty and its cure remained.
Какой-то таинственный знак. Кем он наставлен? И для кого?
Dear Esther, I found myself to be as featureless as this ocean, as shallow and unoccupied as this bay, a listless wreck without identification. My rocks are these bones, and a careful fence to keep the precipice at bay. Shot through me caves, my forehead a mount. This aerial will transmit into me so. All overexposed, the nervous system, where Donnelly's boots and yours and mine still trample. I will carry a torch for you. I will leave it at the foot of my headstone. You will need it for the tunnels that carry me under.
Две машины. Колесо. И не более того. Чертовски холодная вода. В этом повествовании нет правильного или неправильного. Нас направляют, но мы вольны делать то, что мы хотим. Интересно, такая каменная лестница, ведущая наверх. Все сужается и сужается. Природа в виде горы, в виде земли и камня берет свое с годами.
The mount is clearly the focal point of this landscape. It almost appears so well placed as to be artificial. I find myself easily slipping into the delusional state of ascribing purpose, deliberate motive to everything here. Was this island formed during the moment of impact? When we were torn loose from our moorings and the seatbelts cut motorway lanes into our chests and shoulders, did it first break surface then?
Кто знает, кто знает.
When someone had died or was dying, or was so ill they gave up what little hope they could sacrifice, they cut parallel lines into the cliff, exposing the white chalk beneath. You could see them from the mainland or the fishing boats, and know to send aid or impose a cordon of protection, and wait a generation until whatever pestilence stalked the cliff paths died along with its hosts. My lines are just for this, to keep any would-be rescuers at bay. The infection is not simply of the flesh.
Так, какой-то древний Алтай, место поклонения. Что? Цветы здесь красивые. Казалось бы, не так уж и далеко вышка, но стоило пройти часть острова. Она, кажется, еще дальше.
I quote directly, a motley lot with little to recommend them. I have now spent 3 days in their company. That is, I fear, enough for any man not born amongst them. Despite their tedious inclination to quote scripture, they seem to me the most God-forsaken of all the inhabitants of the outer isles. Indeed, in this case, the very gravity of that term, forsaken by God, seems to find its very apex. It appears to me that Donnelly, too, found those who wander this shoreline to be adrift from any chance of redemption. Did he include himself in that, I wonder?
Все мы в какой-то степени одни из них. Шуршание травы, завывание ветра. И вот впереди выброшен на берег корабль. Выбросило ли его штормом? Либо люди его туда поставили. И после уже время, стихия, опустили его на скалы.
Dear Esther, I met Paul. I made my own little pilgrimage. My Damascus, a small semi-detached on the outskirts of Wolverhampton. We drank coffee in his kitchen and tried to connect to one another. Although he knew I hadn't come in search of an apology, reason or retribution, he still spiraled in panic, thrown high and lucid by his own dented bonnet. Responsibility had made him old. Like us, he'd already passed beyond any conceivable boundary of life.
Я слышу треск рации, либо радио. Я хочу посмотреть, что в этой пещере.
I find myself increasingly unable to find that point where the hermit ends and Paul and I begin. We are woven into a sodden blanket, stuffed into the bottom of a boat to stop the leak and hold back the ocean. My neck aches from staring up at the aerial. It mirrors the dull throb in my gut where I am sure I've begun to form another stone. In my dreams, it forms into a perfect representation of Lot's wife, head over her shoulder, staring along the motorway at the approaching traffic in a vacuum of fatalistic calm.
Кем оставлены эти рисунки? И снова эта загадочная химическая формула. Имеет ли она смысл? Тот, кто рисовал здесь, определенно здесь и ел. Кажется, оттуда мы смотрели на это место.
I dreamt I stood in the center of the sun, and the solar radiation cooked my heart from the inside. My teeth will curl, and my fingernails fall off into my pockets like loose change. If I could stomach, I'd eat, but all I seem capable of is salt water. Were the livestock still here, I could turn feral and gorge. I'm as emaciated as a body on a slab, opened up for a premature source of death. I've rowed to this island in a heart without a bottom, all the bacteria of my gut rising up to sing to me.
Да, это именно то место, где мы видели дверь и колесо.
Dear Esther, I have now driven the stretch of the M5 between Exeter and Bristol over 21 times. But although I have all the reports and all the witnesses and have cross-referenced them within a millimetre using my ordnance survey maps, I simply cannot find the location. You'd think there would be marks to serve as some evidence. It's somewhere between the turn-off for Sanford and the welcome brake services. But although I can always see it in my rear-view mirror, I have as yet been unable to pull ashore.
Еще один маяк. Похоже на какую-то старую пристань. Как же эта музыка играет на струнах души. Потрясающе. Давно это место не видело людей. Одиноко и больно скрипят эти погибшие корабли.
There must be a hole in the bottom of the boat. How else could new hermits have arrived?
Еще один знак. Кто его сделал и для кого? Вопросы без ответов.
I had kidney stones and you visited me in the hospital. After the operation, when I was still half submerged in anesthetic, your outline and your speech both blurred. Now my stones have grown into an island and made their escape, and you have been rendered opaque by the car of a drunk. Is this what Paul saw through his windscreen? Not Lot's wife looking over her shoulder, but a scar in the hillside, falling away to black forever.
Насколько велико желание сделать еще один шаг и узнать, что же там внизу.
I've begun my ascent on the windless slope of the western side. The setting sun was an inflamed eye squeezing shut against the light shone in by the doctors. My neck is aching through constantly craning my head up to track the light of the aerial. I must look downwards, follow the path under the island to a new beginning.
Вероятно, бывшая конюшня. Либо же какое-то стойло для коров, быть может. Кстати, да, радиовышка, она там.
Was constructed originally in the early 1700s. By then, shepherding had formalized into a career. The first habitual shepherd was a man called Jakobsen, from a lineage of migratory Scandinavians. He was not considered a man of breeding by the mainlanders. He came here every summer whilst building the bothy, hoping eventually that becoming a man of property would secure him a wife and a lineage. Donnelly records that it did not work. He caught some disease from his malcontented goats and died 2 years after completing it. There was no one to carve white lines into the cliff for him either. Inventory. A trestle table we spread wallpaper on in our first home. A folding chair, I laughed at you for bringing camping in the lakes. I was uncomfortable later and you laughed then. This diary, the bed with the broken springs. Once asleep you have to remember not to dream. A change of clothes, Donnelly's book, stolen from Edinburgh Library on the way here. I will burn them all on the last morning and make an aerial of my own.
Вид отсюда восхитительный. Еще одно стойло, конюшни, и так далее. Снова формулы. пещера. Очень опасная
What to
дорога.
make of Donnelly, the laudanum and the syphilis? It is clearly not how he began, but I've been unable to discover if the former was a result of his visiting the island or the force that drove him here. For the syphilis, a drunk driver smashing his insides into a pulp as he stumbled these paths, I can only offer my empathy. We're all victims of our age. My disease is the internal combustion engine and the cheap fermentation of yeast.
Тот самый огонек буя, к которому мы так и не подошли. А нужен ли он нам вообще? О чем он свидетельствует?
They found Jakobsen in early spring. The thaw had only just come. Even though he'd been dead nearly 7 months, his body had been frozen right down to the nerves and had not even begun to decompose. His fingernails were raw and bitten to the quick. They found the phosphorescent moss that grows in the caves deep under the nails. Whatever he'd been doing under the island when his strength began to fail is lost. He'd struggled halfway up the cliff again, perhaps in a delirium, perhaps trying to reach the Bothy's fire before curling into a stone and expiring.
Какую историю поведает нам эта часть Бейга?
Come back.
Попытку суицида нам не засчитали. Дорожный знак. Этот старый остов корабля напоминает скелет какого-то древнего чудища морского.
Climbing down to the caves, I slipped and fell and have injured my leg. I think the femur is broken. It is clearly infected. The skin has turned a bright, tight pink, and the pain is crashing in on waves. winter tides against my shoreline, drowning out the ache of my stones. I struggled back to the bothy to rest, but it has become clear that there is only one way this is likely to end. The medical supplies I looted from the trawler have suddenly found their purpose. They will keep me lucid for my final ascent.
Это символично. Не буду говорить, какой смысл это представляет для меня. Мне интересно, какой смысл это представляет для вас.
Donnelly's addiction is my one true constant. Even though I wake in false dawns and find the landscape changing, flowing inconstantly through my tears, I know his reaching is always upon me.
А вот и потрясающе красивая пещерная локация. Это пещера, да. Даже с тех давних времен. Это, наверное, самая красивая пещера, которую я только видел в играх. Это великолепно, волшебно. Постоянно меняющееся освещение.
I first saw him sat by the side of the road. I was waiting for you to be cut out of the wreckage. The car looked like it had been dropped from a great height. The guts of the engine spilled over the tarmac, like water underground.
Символы, схемы. Повсюду. Это безумно красиво. Насколько я помню, это путешествие разрабатывалось просто как тест движка, что-то вроде такого. Только посмотрите на эту красоту, на это великолепие. Как же это чарующе прекрасно. Вместе с этой музыкой. Это место, оно завораживает. Не хочется ни разу, ни капельки просто двигаться. Вы только посмотрите. Я помолчу. Наслаждайтесь этой красотой вместе со мной.
If the caves are my guts, this must be the place where the stones are first formed. The bacteria phosphoresce and rise, singing through the tunnels. Everything here is bound by the rise and fall, like a tide. Perhaps the whole island is actually underwater.
нечто.
This is a drowned man's face, reflected in the moonlit waters. It can only be a dead shepherd who has come to drunk drive you home.
Шоссе, машина. Автокатастрофа. Мы выбрались. На улице между тем уже ночь. Здесь, видимо, жили люди, потерпевшие крушение.
I sat here and watched two jets carve parallel white lines into the sky. They charted their course, and I followed them for 21 minutes until they turned off near Sanford and were lost. If I were a gull, I would abandon my nest and join them. I would starve my brain of oxygen and suffer delusions of transcendence. I would tear the bottom from my boat and sail across the motorways until I reached this island once again.
Меняется время суток, меняется музыка, меняется настроение. Мы можем погрузиться в бездну, но бездна нас не понимает. Вышка, она совсем рядом, прямо над нами. Одинокий огонек. Такой же одинокий, как и наша душа на этом острове. Человек.
Of fire and soil, I chose fire. It seemed the more contemporary of the options, the more sanitary. I could not bear the thought of the reassembly of such a ruin. Stitching arm to shoulder and femur to hip, charting a line of thread like traffic stilled on a motorway, making it all acceptable for tearful aunts and traumatized uncles flown in specially for the occasion. Reduced to ash, mix with water, make a phosphorescent paint for these rocks and ceilings.
Снова все те же знаки. Колеса, дверь, столб. Хотя это подвеска.
There were chemical diagrams on the posters on the walls on the waiting room. It seemed appropriate at the time. Still life abstractions of the processes which had already begun to break down your nerves and your muscles in the next room. I crammed diazepam as I once crammed for chemistry examinations. I am revising my options for a long and happy life. From here, I can see my armada. I collected all the letters I'd ever meant to send to you, if I'd have ever made it to the mainland, but had instead collected at the bottom of my rucksack, and I spread them out along the lost beach. Then I took each and every one, and I folded them into boats. I folded you into the creases, and then, as the sun was setting, I set the fleet to sail. Shattered into 21 pieces, I consigned you to the Atlantic. and I sat here until I'd watched all of you sink.
Light from heaven shone around him, and he fell to the ground. Еще одно символичное место. Эти кораблики никогда не достигнут своей цели. Та же самая надпись. Забавно, как мы ее не заметили, когда проходили прямо тут. Фотография девушки, разбитая прямо на том месте, где должно быть лицо. Какой-то врачебный аппарат. На дефибриллятор похоже. Щипцы. Бинты. Шприц. Фотография автокатастрофы. Мы вернулись оттуда. Туда, откуда начинали. Кажется, я пропустил где-то подъем. Хотя, казалось бы, наш путь проложен свечами. Да, абсолютно верно. Лестница была здесь. Но зато мы увидели некоторые дополнительные моменты.
I will drag my leg behind me. I will drag it like a crumpled hatchback, tires blown and sparking across the dimming lights of my vision. I'm running out of painkillers and am following the flicker of the moon home. When Paul keeled over dead on the road to Damascus, they restarted his heart with the jump leads from a crumpled hatchback. It took 21 attempts to convince it to wake up.
Что это за фигура? Кто это?
I've begun my voyage in a paper boat without a bottom. I will fly to the moon in it. I've been folded along a crease in time, a weakness in the sheet of life. Now you've settled on the opposite side of the paper to me. I can see your traces in the ink that soaks through the fiber, the pulped vegetation. When we become waterlogged and the cage disintegrates, we will intermingle. When this paper aeroplane leaves the cliff edge and carves parallel vapor trails in the dark, we will come together.
Был ли этот человек на самом деле? Или это всего лишь наше воображение?
If only Donnelly had experienced this, he would have realized he was his own shoreline, as am I. Just as I am becoming this island, so he became his syphilis, retreating into the burning synapses, the stones, the infection.
Вышка все ближе. Все ближе конец нашего пути.
Bent back like a nail, like a hangnail, like a drowning man clung onto the wheel, drunk and spiraled, washed onto the lost shore under a moon as fractured as a shattered wing. We cleave, we are flight and suspended, these wretched painkillers, this form inconstant. I will take flight, I will take flight.
Какой-то военный бункер, дот. Да, скорее всего, для какой-то берегового орудия. Как давно эту дверь никто не закрывал? Как давно покосился этот забор? Как давно эти камни засыпали лестницу?
I have dredged these waters for the bones of the hermit, for the traces of Donnelly, for any sign of Jakobsson's flock, for the empty bottle that would incriminate him. I have scoured this stretch of motorway 21 times, attempting to recreate his trajectory. The point when his heart stopped dead and all he saw was the moon over the Sanford Junction. He was not drunk, Esther. He was not drunk at all, and it was not his fault. It was the converging lines that doomed him. This is not a recorded natural condition. The gulls do not fly so low over the motorway and cause him to swerve. The paint scored away from his car in lines like an infection, making directly for the heart.
История эта становится все больше понятной. Я бы сказал, здесь не так много историй, как много метафор.
I have run out of places to climb. I will abandon this body and take to the air.
Вот и она, вышка.
Dear Esther, I have burnt my belongings, my books, this death certificate. Mine will be written all across this island. Who was Jakobsen? Who remembers him? Donnelly has written of him, but who was Donnelly? Who remembers him? I have painted, carved, hewn, scored into this space all that I could draw from him. There will be another to these shores to remember me. I will rise from the ocean like an island without bottom, come together like a stone, become an aerial, a beacon, that they will not forget you. We have always been drawn here. One day the gulls will return and nest in our bones and our history. I will look to my left and see Esther Donnelly flying beside me. I will look to my right and see Paul Jakobsen flying beside me. They will leave white lines carved into the air to reach the mainland, where help will be sent. Come back.
конец этой прекрасной истории. А я не буду рассказывать, что я думаю о сюжете, который тут есть. Если вы внимательно следили, вы и так все уже поняли. Но это безоговорочные 10 из 10, 20 из 10. Это любовь еще с очень давнего времени. Спасибо, что были со мной. Всех обнимаю. До новых встреч.